Fosi Audio calls this a headphone amplifier and a DAC, and technically that's true. It is both of those things. However, if you left it at just that, you would be missing out on some of the best features that I think the Fosi K7 has to offer. In fact, these features make this much more than a gaming DAC and headphone amplifier. It makes it a device that if you're a live streamer or even someone that does remote computer work that does a lot of voice calling and or Skype type calling, you are going to want one of these. It really is pretty amazing. But let me show you exactly what those features are and why I think this is a great device. So Fosi actually sent this over and asked me to review it, and I honestly was like, I don't know. And I really wasn't sure if I was going to review it. But once I got my hands on it and started using it and finding out some of the features that it had, it's amazing. Now it's Fosi Audio, so they're going to have like audiophile grade quality in there. And sure enough, if you take a look at the chipset and you take a look at all the readings, I mean, this thing is amazing. And I'll go a little bit more into the sound quality later. But it is a DAC, so that means that it'll take a digital input and turn it to analog. So it's a digital analog converter. The digital inputs are Bluetooth. Now that is a lossless Bluetooth signal for those of you who want to use the Bluetooth on it. It does have digital coax, fiber optic, and then of course it has a USB-C port as well. And that you can plug right up to your computer, which is how I think most people are going to be using this. Now, as far as outputs, there are two analog outputs. There is the RCA output right here, and then, of course, there are your headphone outputs. Now, it does have a balanced output, and it does have just a normal 3.5 millimeter output. And the amount of power depends on which one of these outputs you're using. Now, you'll notice that there is a third jack on the front here. You might be wondering, what is that? Well, let me tell you, that is actually a microphone input. And that's really where this thing starts to change from just a DAC to something a little bit more. But before we go into that, you're probably wondering about that output. Does it output both at the same time? The answer is no. You actually have this output button right here that you push and it selects between the different outputs. And I love the fact that it doesn't output both at the same time. That means you can keep both your headphones plugged up and your speakers plugged up, and just with the press of one button, you can change the output between the two. I really appreciate that because a lot of times we're having to plug and unplug our headphones. No longer are we going to have to do that. And the same with the input, where you can select between all the different inputs. So you could have multiple devices hooked up into this if you want to. Now, everything that you want to change on this is really simple button push. But I really want to talk about that microphone input because I used to be a big time gamer. I'm starting to get back into it now that my kids are getting into it. But besides that, I use a lot of the times my microphone for live streaming and contacting and talking to other people. And one of the things that bothers me is how hard it can be on certain microphones to mute it. That's not the problem with this anymore. So if I'm playing a game and I don't want my kids to hear something, or maybe my kids come in and interrupt the live stream, or I need to cough or something, or maybe you're talking with your boss and you want to mute because you need to say something underneath your breath, it's as easy as just pressing this button right here, one time real quick, and you've muted it. Press it again and you unmute it. And it does show you right on the display whether it is muted or unmuted. And of course there is a display on here so you can see exactly what's going on with your unit. Now that is really cool in and of itself, but that's not the only thing that's neat about the microphone. Now, for those of you who play a lot of gaming, especially if you use Steam, one of the things that can be problematic is from game to game, you might need to change your microphone level. You might need to turn it up, you might need to turn it down. You don't want the game volume to be more than your microphone volume. And the very last thing you want to do is go into your settings of whatever you're using to turn that up and down. Once again, Fosi thought about that. You can just hit this tone mic button, go to the microphone, and you can turn your volume up and down. Now this has saved me a lot of time having to go into the settings, and I really appreciate it. But I also mentioned that there's tone controls, and this has been very interesting because I wanted to hook up some speakers. Now one of the speakers that I hooked up to this were some Edifier speakers. And these Edifier speakers I have here, I will have a review coming out in a little bit, but one thing that they do kind of lack is some bass. So if you're listening to music and or playing a video game and you want some more bass out of it, it's just not really there. However, with this Fosi, I am able to control both the treble and the bass on there. And one of the things that really impressed me with the bass control was that I was able to turn these all the way up, and there was no distortion added to the bass. Now that says a little bit about the speakers, obviously, but that really talks a lot about the Fosi as well, because it wasn't overdriving the amplifier that was already built into those speakers. And that was really impressive to me. The sound quality that it kept, the bass was nice and tight, and it sounded really good. And the same with the treble. I could turn that up and down, and it just kept a really nice sound. There was no added distortion to that, and that was really good. So if you have headphones and or speakers that you're just not quite happy with it, you want a little bit more bass, a little less bass, a little more treble, less, whatever, you can actually make those adjustments right here. You can make those adjustments very quickly on the fly. So even if you prefer something a little bit different when you're playing music versus like when you're talking to someone on Skype, you can do that. Now, if you want, for example, your music to sound more bassy, but you don't want to add any tone controls when you're talking to someone on the internet, there is a bypass button on here. You just hit that and it bypasses all those tone controls. So you don't have to worry about necessarily resetting them if you don't want to. Now it sounds like I love everything about this Fosi, and honestly, I love a lot about it, but there are some things that it's important to note. I really love the microphone control. I've already said that numerous times. However, there is something to think about. If we take a look at the front again, that microphone's only a 3.5 millimeter jack. Now my particular microphone is a 3.5 millimeter. However, there's a lot of microphones now that are all USB. So if you're using a USB microphone, well, you can't plug it up to the Fosi. That's pretty much not going to work out. The other issue with this is its shape and size. It's not very big per se, but you gotta find somewhere to put this on your desk. With all the controls being on the top, it does probably have to be on top of your desk, somewhere where you can easily hit it. So next to your keyboard or next to your laptop, you're gonna have to find room for this, so it will take up desk space. Now the last thing is that display is relatively small, so depending on where you place this, well, it might be harder to see. Now there is one other thing that might throw some of you off. You can't buy it yet. Well, kind of. You can buy it. It's via Kickstarter right now. Fosi is doing this via Kickstarter, so you can purchase it, but you have to wait for it to get shipped. Now I did put a Kickstarter link in the description of the video, so you don't have to worry about finding this. You can follow that link right there. And that link does help out the channel as well if you decide to purchase this. Now I do really like this thing, and I think a lot of you will enjoy it as well. Let me know what you're going to be using this for in the comment section down below. This is Toid, and I'm out.